Okay. So does anyone want to share about their experience with Gate 25? I know it was last week, but if you remember anything that struck you and would like to share, please feel free. Or maybe more might come up after we, cover the class material.
I'll say one thing, not from this past transit, but I think it was a couple of years ago. One morning I woke up and I kind of like burst into this, the Bjork song that's All is Full of Love. I had it running in my mind and I was listening to it and I realized, oh, it's Transit 25 today.
Yeah, that's a really perfect song for this gate. I wonder if she has it. I wouldn't be surprised.
And
Uh,
the thing is, like, if you remember the video, it's like two robots kind of like kissing and being all lovey and touchy.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
Animate now.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because as we're going to look at today, 25 is present in all things, so this universal love, right, that people with this gate can extend to all people, places, things, situations, etc. It makes sense because it's like they're connecting with the presence of 25 throughout existence, right, in all objects, living or inanimate, right? So it makes a lot of sense. I actually felt I saw a flyer for a shamanic type of person, and I kind of felt drawn to it, and I didn't end up actually like reaching out, but that was a little Gate 25 experience. So okay, and still bear with me. I haven't talked for an hour straight. Well, actually, Denise and I had a bit of a marathon conversation the other day, but I can sniffle and cough and sneeze with her. So this is me kind of stretching my voice a bit for the first time in a week. Um, so okay, without further ado, let's start by looking at Michael, right? This new godhead that we're in. And we'll start with a little background on Michael. So Michael is a figure in many different religions. And the myth of Michael has been transformed over time in various different ways. Yet the one constant that remains over time and across all the different religions that have Michael as a figure, right, is that Michael means the most godliness, the most godliness. So he's a figure in the angelic traditions that emerged about 3,000 years ago. And Michael and Adam are actually even considered by some religious sects, Christian sects, to be the same being, that Adam is actually an avatar of Michael, right? And supposedly Michael took Adam's soul to heaven and cleansed it of sin. Or some believe that even Jesus and Michael were the same being, that Jesus was again an avatar of Michael. Michael's also regarded as the custodian of the tree of life. And Jewish tradition claims that Michael, not God directly, gave the law to Moses. So Michael's many different things to different religious people. He's the deliverer of the law, the prince of light, the protector of humanity, the defender of heaven, and a warrior chief of God. And this warrior quality fits, as this is almost an entirely Aryan set of gates, except for the first few lines of gate 25, interestingly. And we know that if you look at these four gates, 51 and 25 have some warrior qualities to them, right? So looking at the placement of Michael, these Michael gates in the body graph, right? We've got, we're missing, what are we missing here? We have 25 and a 50. Oh, sorry, we have all of them. I'm looking at the channel and getting confused. So we've got these gates in the G and in the ego and one up in the ajna. And gate 25, which we're going to be looking at today, is the gate of universal love. It's the ability to embrace everything in existence with love, right? And it's the priest or the priestess, the gate of spiritual rituals, the gate of holiness coming into form. Gate 17 is the gate of opinions, the following. And Ra says no gate is more preoccupied with the future. So it's about driving us forward and organizing us according to reliable, logical patterns. Then we have gate 21, the hunger, this gate of control. This gate has the biggest ego, right, of the ego gates, and it needs to be in control. Then we have 51, the arousing, the gate of shock. So this is sheer power. It's gall, correlates with the gallbladder. It's the nerve. It has the gall to stand up to things, to rules, right? And Ra says this is what initiation is really all about, right? Rules need to be broken. Otherwise, we'd be in the monotony of sameness. There would be no mutation. So there are power dynamics inherent in these gates, right? We have the two most powerful ego gates, which are 51. That's the big will, the big willpower. And 21 is the big ego, right? So 51 and 21, they don't obey anyone's rules, right? I have the 21. I can attest to that. And just in case you're wondering, the 40th gate is the little willpower, and the 26th gate is the little ego. So with the presence of the channel of initiation, we have a lot of power here to begin something, right? Also power to control with the 21 and to shock with the 51, and to impose willpower as they combine forces and work together. So it's no wonder that spirituality goes hand in hand with power struggles and wars. Spirituality, I bring in because 2551 is a mystical channel, right? And so this is really where violence in the name of God comes from. So synthesizing these gates into a relatable story, the spirituality that we find in this channel of initiation has often been turned into control mechanisms, right? The 21, to organize the collective and influence the future. That's the 17. In other words, we'll tell you what opinions we want you to have, really, ultimately for their own control, right? It's about controlling the mind of humanity, right? We're in the quarter of initiation about mind, controlling the mind of humanity in order to organize them for, well, whatever those powers that be, whatever their purposes and self-interest are. So let's take a step back and realize that we're all a duality of light and dark, right? And this is a really big theme with Michael. Michael shines the light, right? But there's a hidden darkness within, right? He brings an influence of good, but there's no way to do that without a commensurate influence of bad, right? Because everything in life is a binary, right? So Ra says you can see the channel of initiation as a channel of struggle. And what's the struggle that it's engaged in? Well, it's the struggle between dark and light. We're imprinted deeply with both, right? Dark and light. And that fits the Christian concept, right, about the balance within us of good and bad, the angel and the devil on our shoulders. One interesting thing Ra says is that evil isn't the binary of good. The binary of good is bad. And what I think he means by that is he's saying that evil is kind of a whole other category of malevolent intent, right? It's not just bad as in ignorance. It's an ignorance in the context of something that has gone horribly wrong in that human being. So this is about good and bad, and we need to accept that we're all good and bad in various ways, right? We live in a binary, a duality. So even though religions speculate about a future, they promise a future where light finally triumphs over darkness, that's just myth. It's not a real possibility because reality always has to have both in balance, right? In a dance with each other. That same principle extends to the dynamic between self and not self. Both are necessary, right? Being awake means seeing both sides of yourself, right? What you're conscious of, and then we eventually learn. We hold space and humility for those things that we don't know, our ignorance. And acting out of ignorance can obviously adversely affect both self and other people, but can be done from this very ignorant or innocent, if you will, place, right? So we all have these moments of awareness and moments of ignorance. We're not designed to be entirely good or bad. That's just a mental comparison trip, right? And think of all the scandals that happen with people that try to just live on the side of light. They claim to be righteous, whether, in the field of religion or as public servants, and it's the same old story, right? Throughout the world, the holier that someone presents themselves as, the more skeletons are in their closet, right? It's a pushing against some aspect of their nature, right? It's like the lady protesteth too much, So we're designed to be differentiated, to be our own authority, to be our own truth beyond comparison. So we need to embrace our darkness, right? And it's really that darkness or that ignorance that inspires the evolution and expansion of consciousness, right? This journey to overcome ignorance, right? But the Michael conditioning results in a mind that is uncomfortable and wants to deny and push away from its own darkness. So another theme is around rules here. So Michael brings a preoccupation with rules to humanity. So as the deliverer of the law, Michael brings, this preoccupation with laws and rules. And, what Ra says is, you would think that the rules come from the cross of laws, right? One of the incarnation crosses, but Ra says, no, not the case. What we're talking about here in the Michael gates are the rules of God, and of course we know all religions write rules. And rules are really just mental comparisons, right? They're homogenized or homogenizing prescriptions for who's in and who's out of the tribe. Who are the chosen people? It's a source of the my God's better than your God mentality. And when you establish a law, you create this comparison between those who are on one side and those on the other, right? So this is the beginning of religious wars and hatred, all through comparison and the need to control, right? And the ego center is very tribal, other than the channel of initiation that we're looking at today. And with that tribalistic tendency, it's always declaring what's mine and what's theirs, right? It's declaring ownership. It's putting a stake in the ground, right? It's saying my tribe is more worthy, right? Ego keynote, than your tribe. My religion is more worthy than your religion. We are the chosen people. So on a certain homogenized level, the initiation here, Michael's initiation, could be a matter of becoming initiated into a particular religion, becoming a Christian or a Jew or a Buddhist or a Hindu or whatever, right? In other words, it can be on the homogenized mundane plane an initiation into a tribe, right? And then there's even an undertone of status about the superiority of me and my ego and my people, right? Michael preoccupies us with worthiness, right? The force of Michael is a mental conditioner of how to be good, how to be worthy of God's love and good graces. Again, we're dealing with ego gates here. And Ross says, if God was smart, he'd know that at the same time you set the rules, you create the rule breakers. So this is the mind, right, that is either struggling to live by the rules or struggling to break them. And life requires the tension that comes from those who break the rules. Ra asks, well, what is life without rule breaking? And he says everything he's teaching, which is apparent if you've been in the human design experiment for, but a day, it's about breaking the rules of the homogenized plane, right? It's about not obeying those rules, but instead following your own inner authority. So there's also themes around the mystical transcendence beyond ego here. right? Which is one reason why I brought in some of those reflections on ego in the group. There's this struggle here between the ego and the self, the struggle between light and dark and ego and this higher self. And it's the potential for an initiation into a higher self beyond the small, artificial, limiting confines of ego, right? It's this possibility to transcend a structure in your consciousness that separates you from others, that defines you in relation to others by deferring to mental categories, right? A structure that we defend habitually so that we can maintain a safe continuity of self, so that we can protect ourselves from things we're not prepared to face, right? In other words, the ego structure is very much to do with Michael. It's protecting us from darkness, from our shadow material. The ego is built around notions of, I'm good. See, I'm good. I do this. I do things like that. That's good, right? See, I'm a good person, right? So we can believe that the reflection of self we see in the mirror is worthy, and that we're worthy of love, of God's love. But some of us are meant to get beyond all of that, right? At least partially, and no one really chooses to transcend ego. I mean, it's not a hobby, right? It's not a walk in the park, right? I mean, there was a famous spiritual teacher who said, regarding the path of enlightenment, it's best not to begin. Don't look for don't start. But once you do start, best to finish. Right? You get to a certain point in that process. If you don't finish, you're going to break, right? You can't go halfway in that journey. So life forces some of us, right, to redefine ourselves, to see outside the ego's limiting box. So how does the ego get initiated? Well, the first thing to say here is this is a projected channel. Life initiates us beyond ego, right? Life does, right? However you want to frame that, source, life, God, universe, what have you. Some larger force initiates us, right, to a higher sense of self. But in that process, we need to see through the vanity of control, right? It's about realizing that whatever you've accomplished, it's not for your ego to pat itself on the back and take credit, right? So you might have noticed that many artists in any creative field, right, will often say, I mean, the wiser amongst them will say that they don't know where their inspiration and creativity comes from. They feel it comes from a source outside themselves. They're just a conduit, right? They channel it. It's not theirs. They have gratitude for it. They surrender to it. When God, calls, they pick up the phone and they follow what's coming through, right? Not because they want to, not because it's convenient, but because that's what they need to do. So they're a vessel for creative inspiration. And that's what we really mean by the ego not taking credit. And when life presents a moment to jump into the void beyond that ego structure, it's what is commonly referred to as the dark night of the soul. Right? And the dark night of the soul is disorienting, right? Disorienting. And that's a relevant word because we're talking about the G center, which has to do with location and direction, amongst other things, right? So it's taking us to a new place, not necessarily in the physical world, but a new place within consciousness, right? And in that process, we lose the self we're familiar with, right? The self that orients us to what's good and what's bad and why we're good and why they're bad and all these defensive structures, right? What's worthy, what's unworthy, who belongs, do I belong? They definitely don't belong. All these ego games. and we move to a self that's fundamentally about love. We transition from thinking we need to follow rules in order to, right, the conditions we need to meet in order to be worthy of God's love, to discovering that we already are love. We don't need to earn it. It's not something that can be given or taken away from us. That's tribal thinking. That's homogenized thinking. This kind of love can't be taken away. So in conclusion, we're not here to any longer judge others by homogenized rules or judge ourselves, right? It no longer makes sense. We can only see the other and live our own correctness without inner comparison, not worrying about doing it right. Right? Transcendence is when you recognize that with uniqueness, there's no point in comparison or measurement. What's to measure if there's only you? And who you are is a binary of light and dark, right? And there are just these structures in consciousness that most of us tend to get caught up in that are really holding us back from the deeper realization of who we really are, of our existence as love. Okay, gate 25, innocence. This is a love gate, and I want to give you a little bit of background on love gates. This is the gate of universal love, and it's one of 4 transpersonal love gates in the body graph, right? Which are in total 25, 10, 15, and 46. They're called anti-mundane love gates or transpersonal love gates. I should note that 10 is in both categories of personal and transpersonal. We'll talk about that more when we get to it. But these gates are all gates of the vessel of love incarnation cross. Right? And gate 25 is the blood in the vessel of love. We'll talk more about that as we wrap up today's session. Anti-mundane love gates are about finding higher love, right? Higher love, which can often be found through somebody, right? And the love itself isn't even necessarily in, so to speak, that person you're connected to, right? It just happens. But it's a love deeply rooted in the monopole itself, right? And it rarely feels as strongly as personal love, right? The things we're looking to get out of or experience in that relationship. This is not emotional or conditional love. It's coming from a deeper source than that. It's coming from self, right? And this universal love, because it's not romantic and emotional and sexy and all these things, it's the coolest of love here in gate 25, the coolest of love. And 25 is part of the bedrock of existence. As we mentioned in the beginning, when we're looking at the design of forms, all inanimate objects have a G center with the 25th gate, right? So this universal love capacity in the 25th gate makes sense as it's a gate present in all things. So it's almost like it recognizes itself, right? It recognizes the potential for all things to be alive, and it recognizes that all things are made of love. So when looking at love gates, we're also looking at gates of hate, right? Again, everything in the binary, right? Whether we're looking at mundane or anti-mundane love gates, they can say, I love you or I don't love you. That's just the dualistic nature of life. And this mechanism moves back and forth, vacillating in the binary, right? There can't be love without hate. If you've ever loved someone, that and things go sour, that's someone that you're at least initially more inclined to hate before you land in kind of a neutral accepting place. You go from one extreme to the other before you find the middle, the gray area, the more nuanced, sophisticated perspective. So Ra calls gate 25 a place for loving, which I really love that, a place for loving. And it's the gate of the priest or the priestess. Again, it's about universal love. It's romantic only in the sense of this higher transpersonal theme. So it's not personal romance. It's not directed at that sphere of life. It's the romance with a God that you can never really know, right? Much like the unrequited romance with your beloved. And it's being loving towards everything in an impersonal way. And through loving anything, we can get to something else, right? Think about that. Think about what extending love to someone or something does within you, right? What does that open up within you? How does that shift your internal experience? That is a worthy contemplation. So gate 25 knows that everything deserves to be treated with love. The insect that crawls past your shoe, right? The homeless person on the street, the annoying coworker, right? The boss that laid you off, the mug you have coffee from every morning that says best mom or dad ever, right? This gate can be equally loving to people, places, and objects. It can equally love its home, its garden, a work of art, a favorite piece of furniture, a restaurant, anything, right? It's not specific or personal. It's a way of being. So with gate 25 in your body graph, you are the place for loving. You know, and we would be remiss not to include the fact that 25 can extend love to all manner of unpleasantness. This can be a love extended to the darker things in life, for the difficult emotions, for the aspects of your partner that challenge you. It truly is a capacity to love everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it doesn't need a reason to love, right? Because innocence doesn't need reasons. Existence is the reason that anything is worthy of love. And it's also where love gets initiated, right? Because 25 is in the quarter of initiation. So humanity needs to be initiated into love, whether to love thy neighbor, to love God, to love self, etc. You know, Ross says human design is based on a fundamental transcendent love, right? That everyone should love themselves. It's about initiating this transpersonal love, right? When we look at the body graph, we see that gate 25 is an individual gate in the centering circuit, you know, which is a minor circuit that's part of the larger knowing circuit. And we know that the individual knowing circuit is fundamentally creative, and it's here to empower knowing, right? Knowing that comes in a pulse, and in the gaps between pulses can be melancholy, right? And knowing is beyond morality. It's not knowing what's good or bad or acceptable or unacceptable. It's a pure knowing that transcends these social constructs. That's why being individuated is an amoral process, right? The knowing circuit is amoral, right? I didn't say immoral, but it is amoral, right? It's living out the cards life dealt you without judgment or comparison. And we can see a larger movement in this direction in recent history, at least in the first world, you know, more and more people really their life is about differentiating, you know, being authentic, not conforming to some sort of whatever, you know, rules and laws that they've been indoctrinated with. And this kind of shift is really aligned to the upcoming shift from a tribal and collective global incarnation theme, right, in the cross of planning, to a primarily individual global incarnation theme in the sleeping phoenix. So let's look at the centering circuit here. You can see the centering circuit kind of zoomed in on the body graph to the right here. And the centering circuit carries its own themes within the larger framework of the individual circuit, right? Just want to make sure everyone should be muted. If not, okay. So as I was saying, the centering circuit carries its own themes within the larger framework of the individual circuit, right? And one really important thing to notice here is that there's no mind in the centering circuit. There's just the sacral, the G, and the ego. So that tells us something very important right here, that the mind uncenters us. To remain centered, we need to have a healthy distance from our mind, right? We need to be rooted in our power and our sense of self. All gates and channels in the centering circuit are about being centered in yourself. You know, I say in yourself because, again, we're dealing with the G center. And when we look at gates 34, 10, 51, and 25 in the circuit, these are all the ingredients that have to do with centering, right? Centering requires the power to differentiate in the 34, right? That power, you know, that fuels the entire integration circuit, right? And it requires the correct behavior in gate 10 and the courage of the 51 and the innocent love of the 25. But no mental stories. No, that just gets us lost. You know, we lose ourselves and we lose our center and our power with mental identification. This is about finding a love of self and a love of life through differentiation that empowers our individual survival in the 3410, right? And it's about being initiated into a higher self and universal love through shocking experiences in the 2551. So questions about gate 25. Okay, let's continue. So let's look at the channel of initiation, a design of needing to be first. So first off, let's state the obvious, which is that this channel gives name to the quarter of initiation, right? And while we've been talking about initiating the mind as the major theme of this quarter, in this channel, we go beyond that. This is the initiation into being. This is an initiation into your true self, right? This is where the shocking and courageous power of ego in the 51 meets innocence in the 25. Not innocence in the sense of innocent motivation, which is simply about being agendaless. No, the innocence in the 25 is about innocently extending love to everything in existence. It's seeing that everything that exists is worthy of love. So people with this channel are both initiated and can initiate others by the example of who they are. Their self is the catalyst for initiation. Their identity, right, is the catalyst for initiation. You don't willfully push people into initiation with ego. No, you're a space for initiation, a space for love. That's what a shaman or a priest or priestess does. They initiate you into a higher consciousness by their mere presence. And I would add, by their own relationship with their self, which we're going to expand on shortly. These are people who can jump into the void with might be described as a foolhardy innocence. And by doing so, are initiated in some way. You know, this is the fool in the tarot deck who jumps into the void, but they survive with their innocent heart. Whereas if you're not innocent and you want something for your own glory because you're driven by ego, when you jump into the void, you'll be destroyed, whether physically or psychologically. It's important to see here that this channel is a tribal bridge to love, right? Tribal bridge to love. This is the only channel in the ego that's not tribal. So it's not about support and reciprocity. It's self-motivated, small self to big self. And it doesn't have the material competency of the tribal channels. It doesn't know how to price things, for instance. But even though it's not a tribal channel, it is a bridge from the tribe to connect to love. You know, these other tribal channels can find love of self through the 2551. And remember, this is a mystical love. It's not the religious dogma in the 3740. This is the mystic who realizes something about the nature of self, self as love, and then brings that back down to the tribe. So all religions depend on these 2551 pioneers of consciousness to initiate them into a higher state of consciousness themselves. But unfortunately, as we well know, the insights from mystical experiences get watered down and lost for various political reasons, right? And also because most people are threatened by what they reveal. You know, most people aren't designed to pierce beyond the veil, you know, and it's certainly not what the 3740 is after. It's not after transcendence, first and foremost, it's after belonging. It's the bridge in the mystical circuit. It's not mystical in and of itself. It codifies mysticism, you know, into laws and rules and so on, so we can socially belong and meet our needs. Getting back to that Mitra theme, right, in 37. You know, it's about including more people, right? So these truths have to be made palatable for the masses, right? No one wants to be threatened every Sunday morning. You know, you want to go and feel good and belong. But this channel is really the mystical process of initiation. And again, remember, initiation is an invitation from life itself. You know, we're talking about a projected channel here, right? People with this channel can be initiated by a priest or priestess, or they can be the priest or priestess doing that. But ultimately, their own journey of coming to the higher self must be initiated by life itself, right? By being at the right place at the right time, because we're going to see that 25 has a relationship with 46, and that's serendipity. So think about how Ra was invited into a new dimension of reality. That's, you know, what we have here with human design. It's a new dimension of reality, mechanics, right? They were hidden. It's a new level, right, of reality, if you will, that we didn't have up until very recently in history. So through these kinds of initiations, we have the opportunity to discover the essence of our spirit, to truly individuate and express our unconditioned uniqueness, right? But initiation is something that must find you, right? Seeking it rarely brings rewards. It rarely brings true transformation. It just brings knowledge, maybe spiritual trinkets, spiritual affectation, right? All the pomp and circumstance without any true transformation. But you have to be ready for it when it shows up, which just means living correctly and having the right relationship with your mind, right? Knowing that we are the passenger. You know, Ra was already purified or cleansed, if you will, by fasting and living in nature for years, away from societal conditioning. So his vehicle was ready for the encounter, for the initiation. So being ready simply means being capable of surrender to that invitation from life to transcend yourself, right, and pioneer a new direction, you know, when called upon. On the more mundane level, people with this channel are naturally competitive. It's a design of needing to be first. They won't enter into a contest they don't think they can win, right? They can be sore losers if they don't win. That is to the extent that they're still stuck in the trappings of their ego, again, thinking their willpower is up to them. But if the challenge is right, they can show up with a fierce warrior spirit. Or in the binary, if they're entering into the wrong situation, they can be cowardly. But they're designed to expand their horizons, stretch their limits, and experience breakthroughs. And these breakthroughs could be of a physical nature, such as an Olympic athlete pushing their body to break a world record, or a breakthrough in consciousness, such as what Ra experienced, piercing beyond the veil and having an encounter with an entity that transmitted the human design system. But through embarking on these pioneering experiences, people with this channel discover their courage and the power of their spirit. And that can inspire others, although it also can at times shock them with their unexpected leaps into the unknown. Questions about the channel of initiation?
James, I have a question. How would you tell in mundane life for people with channel initiation when they are bringing shocks? That's really the healthy, not the not self. That's my question.
Well, I guess it's very difficult to determine sometimes, Nangshi, whether it's a not self shock or not. I mean, I definitely see not self shocks with people who have a dormant 51 or a not self 51, i.e., they have 25 pointing at it. And those are people who seem like they go out of their way to perform a shock, and that's a different thing. Whereas this true expression, as much as the willpower is beyond their control, so is the shock. I think they're often as shocked by what they're going through as the people around them are. So I think you can kind of feel in the atmosphere, and that's sort of the basis of your question. You're saying sometimes it feels wrong. You can feel where it's really coming from. I'd usually track it to a dormant 51, someone who's trying to find their worth by being shocking or being courageous or having that not self 51. And how do you broach that conversation? Well, obviously you need trust. It needs to be kind of a safe space for that. I don't really have a systematic kind of approach. I think it's something that you have to kind of feel in the moment what the right reflection is for that person, but it's never something you can, I think, universally kind of prescribe. I think it's reading the atmosphere in that conversation to see, are they open to seeing that they are being shocking for some not self-motivation? Are they able to see that? So yeah, I can never answer these things in universal systematic ways.
Thank you, James. Yeah, I guess I was more thinking of from the point of for those people, they are so, I felt the power is so strong. How do I show them my boundary? Like, how do I? Very often I found they are there is this purity, innocent. They might just show up in your door middle of night, and they might not be for bad intention, but they might not have the what called the common sense of the homogenizer common sense, maybe for good. But then how do you communicate as adults with them, or how do you deal with that kind of energy when there's a boundary needed?
Yeah, which would be especially challenging for a chart like yours with an undefined ego, which can easily feel intimidated or threatened, or an undefined solar plexus that can be overwhelmed. But the answer, Nangshi, is always in the truth of the relationship, right? It's the space between you that really informs what can be said, where there are permissions, where there aren't, what they're ready for, and how to best craft the right language to get something across. But the most important thing is never to feel any pressure or urgency around saying anything to anyone, you know, to kind of change them. I mean, if I was around someone for some reason or another that I couldn't quite get out of my life, and they were, I don't know, just unpleasant in some way or shocking or whatever, I mean, yeah, it's not difficult for someone with my design to kind of assert boundaries. But I always find that the important thing about asserting boundaries is, where is my awareness sitting in myself when I'm doing so? Because as a 45-21 with my defined emotional center, I can really crush people with my words if the energy is charged. So I think the most important thing isn't really what you say, but how you say it, and to make sure that you're not carrying a charge or a trigger as you do so. Otherwise, it just won't work and it can undermine the relationship. That's kind of as best as I can offer as kind of a general prescription.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, James. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? By the way, guys, it is, you know, class is always longer when we cover a new godhead. So we'll probably go about, oh, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes past the hour. But, you know, as always, just drop out if you have other obligations. Okay, if there's no other questions, let's continue. So the polarity of 25 is 46. And, you know, I just mentioned about being at the right place in the right time for the initiation, for that invitation from life. 46 is pushing upwards. It's the gate of the love of the body as a temple, right, as something sacred. And it's a gate of determination as well. And it's about serendipity, being at the right place at the right time. And when we think about this gate, it's not about the body externally, as in, am I attractive or not? You know, it's not that kind of a thing. It's really about this concept of interoception, which I mentioned a few classes ago. Interoception being the capacity to sense the internal state of the body. This is really cornerstone to somatic work, right? All somatic work requires interoception, right? So 46 is an important gate in relation to the spleen, as it's what's called either the lead gate or the prime gate. I can't remember the terminology here, but it is the lead gate for all subsequent splenic gates in the wheel, right? So you get to 46, all the splenic gates follow 46 in the wheel. And that holds clues about how to be with splenic fears. It's very interesting to me as someone with 46 as my design moon, and I have an undefined spleen. So this is something I've definitely, you know, explored. The clue here is really to develop your interoception, right, in order to deal with the splenic fears and anxieties, right, to become somatically literate, right, to become very familiar with your internal topography, right, your internal terrain, to be able to feel into and sense what's happening internally, right? And as for me, as a 59-6, to have that intimate relation with self, right? So the key, though, is to be able to explore your internal states in a way where you can remain centered. And that's so much of what somatic therapy is really about. It's about nervous system regulation, and so much of the nervous system is in the solar plexus, right? Right? Can I regulate my nervous system despite all the chatter and the noise of mind, right? Because the solar plexus is primarily in this quarter of mind, right? And can I have the right relationship with my body as temple? Can I have the capacity for interoception without being overwhelmed by what I find on the inside? You know, the demons that we come across, the fears, the overwhelming internal states, right? Perhaps the amplified fears that are happening with an undefined spleen, such as in my case, right? So, and everything we're talking about here is about being centered. And being centered is about being free of the mind, right? Free of the mind. The mind is what uncenters us. It's what takes us away from the truth of our identity. It's what takes us away from our power, from our body's truth, and it takes us away from our innocence, right? So the creative tension here, that's always what polarities are about. The creative tension here is between 46 and 25. It's about relating to everything that happens in your body with innocence. In other words, it's all welcome. The anger, the sadness, the anxiety, this really weird sensation that you can't even describe, it just reminds you of a color, all the weird, subtle, transitory, sometimes difficult, sometimes overwhelming things the body feels. Can we be with all of that? Can we include all of that from a place of innocence? Right? Let's not judge it. It's just here. There's no switch you can hit to stop your body from feeling what it's feeling, right? You need to give it some love in the sense of allowing its right to be, right? And if you do that, it will serve you. Whatever you're going through will serve you. And it will move along in its own timing, right? You're just the observer, right? You're not it. So it has to move along in its own timing when it's no longer needed, when it's no longer relevant. So we make so much of existence wrong, not just other people who are not in our tribe, who worship the wrong gods, who are on the wrong political party, who say things we don't like, but we make ourselves wrong. We make parts of our life experience wrong. So this 46-25 relationship is showing us that to be embodied and to remain centered, we need a healthy distance from the mind. And we need to regard everything happening both within and without, right, through an innocent heart. Only then can we really be. And nothing's more centering than being, right? And this, by the way, is what makes the shaman or the priest or the priestess. These are people who have confronted all of their fears, right? And internal demons, and learn to be with them innocently, without a judgmental framework, free from the mind's stories. They've welcomed everything into existence. And that gives them their power. That's why they're a space for love that then enables those who work with them to relax into their own self, to find their own fundamental essence below the anxious, fearful layers of mind. So now we come to the mirror, and I will say here that some gates have obvious mirrors, right? And some don't. And this is in the latter category. But to my understanding, the mirror of 25 is 10. And when I delved into this contemplation, it really made so much sense to me. So gate 10 is loving being alive, right? Loving being alive, love of self and love of life. It's this gate that's both transcendent love gate and a mundane love gate. It's a very complex gate, right? It opens up to 3 other gates and channels. So the theme here is about loving yourself as you are and loving being alive in the world, loving the world as it is, right? And that's just like the 25's innocence, right? That's the mirror function here in 10. Loving the world as it is, right? It has the potential for awakening in the 10-20, right? Which is about awakening to what life really is, not an ideal life or a morally sound life or a life that fits into some sort of social programming, right? It's not a life of virtue or mental comparisons and judgments, but simply to what life is, right? It's a surrender, an innocent surrender to both the light and the dark, the good, the bad, and the ugly, to love life as it is with all that entails innocently. So let's look at the not-self themes and the wisdom potential. So gate 51, right, without 25, thinks it needs to be a spiritual guide, right? It's trying to be that priest or that priestess, right? And remember, in the holistic chart, the person might be, right? But there will be an additional mental trip here to become one that does not serve whatever they're naturally meant to be in that regard, right? And 25 without 51 is looking to be more brave. It's looking to demonstrate that it has the guts, right? Or it's trying to initiate other people into this or that. 25 without 51 is also potentially looking to be shocked into a higher consciousness, which, by the way, it can be, because it is designed to meet the other side. But there's no need to seek it, right? That's the clinging, that's the desperation. Oh, I need this. My life is going to be better if only I could get to a higher state of consciousness. No, no, no. You'll meet the 51s, right? That's designed to happen. They just need to live correctly so they're prepared to surrender when the initiation occurs, right? Okay. Last time we looked at the right angle cross of Eden and the juxtaposition cross of crisis and the left angle cross of the plane. This time we're going to start with the right angle cross of the vessel of love. Quite an extraordinary cross. So looking at these four gates of love, right, and the metaphor of the vessel of love, let's start with gate 15. And that's the love of humanity, and it's the aura, right? And it's the outside of the container of that vessel, right? Then we come to the 46th gate, which is the love of the body. It creates the actual form of the container itself. It's the inside structure of the container. Then the 10th gate is the gate of behavior, right? How does that express in the world, right? So it's the lip of the vessel. Everything pours out of the 10th gate, right? And what you pour is the 25, the blood, right? Universal love, right? Remember, 25 is in everything. And remember, universal love isn't ecstatic, right? It's the coolest of love. So people born on this cross with their personality sun in gate 25 are especially capable of being a priest or priestess, some sort of spiritual guide type of figure, by whatever name you want to call that. And they connect us to our being. You know, they connect us to cosmic love through our being, right? Our nature as love. And they do so from their capacity to meet all things with love, to not let those fears deter them from loving, you know, from closing down their heart, to not let the mental concepts and judgments deter them from loving. Now, Ra says these people can get into trouble on the mundane, homogenized plane because others don't understand their capacity to extend love to objects as much as they can to people. You know, that just seems absurd. Now, of course, in the holistic body graph, there are always things which can affect that expression. It's not as if you have 25, you're not also designed for other types of love. It depends what else is there, right? But in isolation, this is what 25 can do. And because all four arms of this cross are love gates, we know that love is the biggest question in their lives. What does it mean to love? You know, what is it to know love? Can I extend love to all things? 25's dilemma. Do I love my body or do I hate my body? Do I love being embodied? You know, or do I hate being in this meat suit? It's 46's dilemmas. Do I love myself or do I hate myself? Do I love life or do I hate life? 10's dilemmas. Do I love humanity or do I hate humanity? 15's dilemmas. So people in this cross often get shocked and broken in love because of that influence of the 15, right? That harmonic gate to 25. They have to meet shock as part of their process. And, you know, when they encounter shocking experiences, they can get lost. Again, a G center keynote. And at its worst, they can feel that they can never have love, that they can never hold on to love, you know, that love is always taken away from them. So Ross says, you know, if you're looking for a nice smiley cross, this one's it. And children born on this cross need a lot of love, right? And just bear in mind how differently this can express in an undefined G than a defined G. Just bear in mind the challenges that could be there, that desperation for love. Let's move to the juxtaposition cross of innocence. So now we move from the design sun and earth and the 10 and the 15 to the 58 and the 52. Gates that I know very well, as they're the personality side of my incarnation cross. And Ross says, gate 58, line 1 is the most beautiful line of all 384 lines. It's the love of life. The energy to just love being in the world. And Jonah Dempsey has gate 58, line 1, and I don't know if I've ever met anyone who seems to love life more than Jonah. You know, he's a true bon vivant, right? And this cross is really driven to enjoy love and life. But there are some internal conflicts here, right? Because there's melancholy in the 25, right? Part of that knowing circuit, and the love of life in the 58, line 1. So there can be this sadness despite this love of life. And because of the drive to love life and to overcome the sadness, Ross says hedonism was invented or created by somebody who came in on this cross. You know, driven by this notion to just enjoy life no matter what. You know, we'll find a way to love life at any cost. So this cross is really about the pursuit of happiness, right? I love life. I'm so driven to love life, and I'm dealing with sadness from time to time. They're on this quest, you know, this pursuit of happiness. And that pursuit takes on a whole other meaning when it's transpersonal and karmic, as we're going to see in the next cross here. But remember, these people are fourth line, influential, priest or priestess, you know, and they can throw you into the void to find yourself. And they're absolutely fixedly determined, right, to love life, right? And Ra gives this example of a French missionary boiling in a Mohawk Indian pot and still singing the praises of Jesus, you know? That's something only a fourth line could do, you know, especially a fourth line on a juxtaposition cross, because they're just that fixed. They're never going to relent, right? So the bottom line is these are people who are very fixed in their attempt to influence their network about feeling good about the nature of life. Finally, we come to the left angle cross of healing. Gate 25, line 5 is the only line of the 384 lines that deals specifically, or uses, I should say, the term healing in that, as such, in that language. So this cross is a combination of universal love with 25, with the love of the body in the 46, and the drive towards joy for life in the 58, as well as the ability to get still and focus for correcting the understanding in 52. So Ross says people that come in on this cross are here to heal or be healed. And at their worst, at their most not self, they can be hypochondriacs, right? And that partly is influenced by the 58 looking at the spleen and being part of this channel of judgment and its insatiable, you know, dissatisfaction, always looking for something to correct. You know, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong. There's something wrong. There's something wrong, you know? So the cross of healing, of course, surprise, surprise, often starts off as the cross of illness, right? And as we know, people who start off sickly tend to want to be healers. So this is the path of the wounded healer, you know, that we probably all have at least heard about. And that's why doctors are also often spiritual guides at their best, right? The best doctors, right? Straddling both the physical and the metaphysical. All right, these are really the doctors that are called to the path, not the ones who are doing it for status or recognition or because their parents set them off on that path, right? But the ones that are thrown into it choicelessly, right? And as they resolve their own issues, they learn how to resolve others, right? And we're dealing, this is transpersonal, right? So it is very much about service to other. So that's the narrative arc here. People born on this cross start off being ill, usually needing others to heal them. And in being healed, they get turned on to being healers themselves. Right. But it's like what Carl Jung said about, I don't remember his exact words, but you're not really, he said something about you're not really going to wake up or be healed if you don't have, spirituality in your life. Right. And that's what we have here with Gate 25. You have to be awake, right, spiritually to your own true self and being, right, in order to heal. People on this cross also endorse the importance of health above all else. It's more important than any other metric of success. I mean, who wants to be wealthy but sickly, right? Or famous but sickly, Health is the true foundation for all other joy in life. So it's about enrolling the mind in the importance of the quality of life, right? And that's a theme that continues for this second half of the quarter, all about the quality of life. And the last thing I'll say about this cross is that it's the beginning of a new kind of authority, not the tribal authority of the 4521 or the collective authority of the 31:7 or the authority of religious creeds in the 37:40 and the religious bureaucrats who claim to know how you should run your life. No, this is the beginning of health authority, the authority, that in such a position because they know how to heal you, right? Which is perhaps the most powerful authority of all. Okay, any questions or comments about anything that we've discussed today? Thoughts, feelings, memories?
I would be happy to give a little shout out to my grandma, who is a personality sun 25/5, and she passed a few years ago, unfortunately, and I didn't get a lot of time to know her because she's on my dad's mom, and I had broken home and all that other stuff. But in the very short time that I got to know her, I thought she was probably one of the most powerful people that I've ever met. And I had never actually witnessed someone who you could she just exuded the love, and the whole community was like built around her. She was deeply religious. She was a Catholic, and she like held the whole community together, and they went on her funeral. It was incredible. She filled the whole church, this huge church, everyone coming and pouring their support of how they brought her to know, or how she brought them to know God, or how she had initiated them. There were so many people who came up to me even, and they're like, they knew I had maybe not had as much time with her, and so they wanted to share stories with her so I could know her a little bit better. And like, I have never seen so many people so touched by one individual. And unfortunately, my grandfather, her husband, just took a fall on Wednesday night, and he has been declared brain dead. So they've taken him off life support. And he's about to join her. And I think that's really, really beautiful. And especially around this time with, you know, we just had the transits in the 25, and obviously Neptune's about to go into 25 and all these things. And I think that's really interesting. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you for that share. Yeah, she really sounds like a 25 for sure. Yeah. Jawan shared something in the group about a priestess, a Korean priestess who seems to really embody this as well. Really powerful people for sure. I have a friend that started off as a client, and he's a 25 line 5, and could just tell old soul, really precocious, you know. Yeah, a lot of power there to really initiate people, from a loving place. Yeah, thank you. Mm.
Yeah, James, I have a not necessarily a question, but kind of question the sharing. Like I have a gate 25 as 6 line, and I didn't really quite get it until you said today about the relationship to 46, the fear.
Mm.
My question before was like, oh, why was that inappropriate action can break up the spirit? I didn't get it when I read the Rave Jing, but I can see these days for me, there is this fear, such a fear of to love and to be loved in the mundane way, and also to not open the heart. And I can see that there was a lot of inappropriate action of innocence before, or the Saturn returns.
Mm.
And I can feel that physical fear of that. I don't know what was the trauma with the gate 25 that can be imprinted in the body level, even though it's in the G center. But I love how you beautiful pointing to the 46 relationship. So that
Mm.
gave me inspiration on that. Yeah.
Mm. Great. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on that. I find it kind of poetic that the spirit is grounded in the temple, which is the body.
Mhm.
So it reminds me of like like a quote that Ra has, but it's not even just Ra. Like anyone who's kind of studied these sort of spirituality things, like a good teacher will tell you that you're not going to be spiritual unless you're actually grounded in your body. And I'm remembering the quote that Ra mentions, like, I don't exactly remember how it goes, but it's something about we're not here to be, secluded up in a mountain somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, anybody can be perfect if completely left alone in the perfect circumstances, but it's really like being in the Maya, being grounded in the body, living this life that we actually get to be spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it kind of takes me back to my reason of why I kind of wanted this course and why I wanted to go into the cross thing of how we're all interconnected, that we're here to live in the Maya despite everything.
Mm-hmm.
And, I have the same line as you in the 46 in my dormant P moon. So maybe that's the theme that's been tugging.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, it's in life, it's in engaging with people where the rubber meets the road, right? And that's where we stir up fears and anxieties and all those things that we need to learn to be with, to be centered within ourselves, no matter what we encounter, right? And yeah, that's really the message of 25 and 46. We need to go into the body, and meet all of those things innocently, lovingly, with acceptance. And that's how we remain centered, right? And that's how we find even the serendipity to be in the right place, to be ready for the initiation. If a lot of the spiritual paths today have, a lot of the communities out there have just gotten, well, they're just not working, unless that they've embraced the body and the importance of nervous system regulation as the platform for consciousness, right? It's really the platform for consciousness. So they were skipping that step and running right to the, to the mind, to awareness, to consciousness, without first contending with the, with the flesh. So yeah, it underscores the importance of seeing the relationship with the gates. It really changes the story when you see, because all the gates are related to each other, but some are like, immediate family, some are like first cousins, some are second cousins, some are like second cousins once removed or twice removed or whatever. Some have more relationship than others. And you really got to know the family to really understand all of the nuances and dimension and how the gates really work. So thank you again for initiating me, Denise, into this course that my mind at times protested and was like, what? You want me to do what?
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you're doing it.
Believe me, my mind definitely sort of freaked out at the scope of this course at some point, but here I am, and it's been great. Yeah. Okay, anyone else? Any final thoughts? Okay. Well, thank you all. Great to be with you. And, we're a little off track. I'll send 17 at some point over the weekend. And yeah, look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.